real quick. We'll check. He's not landing. Okay, no one's landing, and no one is on the runway. So we'll go ahead and taxi onto the runway.
November 477, Mike Charlie is 7 miles east inbound visual, runway 28.
Backtrack to get to the numbers so we have as much length as possible. We actually could have probably made that takeoff without backtracking. This runway is long enough. Now, before we take off, I got one more thing I want to talk about. This Cessna 182 has a pretty powerful engine compared to the 172. So if you're doing short field operations, which we're not right now, but just pretend we were, if you wanted to, you can take off with the flaps set to 20, although normal takeoff position flaps are set to 10. But the engine in this airplane is powerful enough, it can take off with the flaps set to 20 degrees. So that is an option there. Remember that you have that. We'll take off with full flaps today. Alright, so we are on the runway. HSI to compass matches. Alright, so and runway 32 heading looks good. Alright, so let's go ahead and take off. We got a slight crosswind from the right. Actually, the winds are shifted. They're pretty much down the runway.
10 miles southeast inbound visual, runway 32. Kilo Victor Delta India traffic, running November 9.
Alright, rotate at 55 knots.
10 miles southeast inbound visual, runway 31.
And we want to climb out at 70 knots, just like in the 172.
Kilo Alpha Yankee Sierra traffic, call November 564 November Delta is 5 miles north inbound ILS, runway 18.
Alright, there's 500 feet. We can start our turn on course.
Hotel Bravo is 4 miles southeast inbound visual, runway 31. Kilo Charlie Whiskey Victor traffic, call November 8th Street 78 X-ray is 1 miles west inbound visual, runway 9.
Now, we have to do a throttle and prop reduction on takeoff to avoid hurting the engine. Alright, we're at 1,000 feet. I'm going to pitch for 90 knots. I forgot to turn my transponder on. How could you let me forget that? Alright, so climb speed in the 172 is 80 knots, 90 knots in the 182. I don't think we're going to get up to 6,000 looking at those clouds. So as I speed up to 90 knots, we need to do a power reduction for climb. We don't want to hurt the engine. See, we're at red line with the RPM. So a good climb power setting will be 25 on the manifold pressure. Remember, we're decreasing power, so we got to decrease throttle first. 25 on the manifold pressure. We'll bring the RPM out to 2,400. I recommend, if you don't have a throttle controller, we'll see what the problem to 25 inches. If you don't have a throttle controller, you can use your keyboard. The control and F2, F3 keys will manipulate the prop. So hold down control, hit F2 or F3. F2 will decrease prop, F3 will increase prop. Control F1 is full feather, and control 4 is full power. Control shift is mixture. So just pushing the F1 through F4 keys normally controls the throttle. In fact, I'll show you well, nah, you get what I'm saying. Alright, so we're going to pitch for 90 knots. We're going to shut them up by putting it on the guard frequency. And we just want to keep climbing this bird. Now, as we climb, we have to increase throttle because manifold pressure will decrease as the air gets thinner as we climb. Now, from here on out, it's really a lot like the 172. We do the same checklist, same flows. Everything is really the same. You just need to know the few differences between the planes, like the speeds and the weights. And even the speeds are mostly the same. So, really, flying the 182 is exactly the same as the 172 as long as you know how to work the engine and work with the avionics in it. Alright, let's climb on up. We'll say about 4,500 instead of 6. Doesn't look like we're going to get that high. These clouds are a bit low. Alright, we've leveled off at 4,500. So, yeah, just like in the 172, now we want to set our cruise power setting once we've sped up. So we'll, remember, decreasing power right now. So I'm going to set us to 20 inches on the manifold pressure. And we could actually leave the RPM alone if we wanted to. And I'm going to set it to about 2,300. Remember to be really easy with the prop controller. You may actually want to use your mouse wheel or the keyboard commands if you don't have a throttle controller, as opposed to grabbing it with the mouse. Alright, so 23 on the so 20 inches on the manifold pressure and 23 on the RPM. Let me look up the performance real quick. Now, I'm not going to worry about leaning the fuel mixture since we're going to be descending soon anyway, so I'm not going to worry about it. I've leaned it out a little bit since we're up at 4,500, but I haven't actually leaned it out the way you would. Alright, so cruise performance at a pressure altitude of 4,000 feet with the RPM set to 2,300, manifold pressure set to 20, and temperature 16 degrees. That's above standard for this altitude. So 20 degrees above standard, we should be getting 120 knots true airspeed and 10.5 gallons per hour. If I look at the where's it at? The fuel flow, we're getting about, that's about 11.5. So we're not too terribly far. We're 1 gallon more than what the performance is saying, but that's probably because of I have not leaned the mixture out. If I were to lean the mixture out, it would be different. Alright, so air's getting a little bumpy as we get around these clouds. Let's see, we're 19 nautical miles, 9 minutes from Eastman, so looks like we're going to trek through these clouds. I'm actually going to bring us down to 2,500. Autopilot's flying the plane right now. So autopilot is the same as the 172. Keep in mind, this plane can descend faster than the 172. Now watch, I'm going to decrease our throttle. Our airspeed is going to stay mostly the same because our RPM is keeping it that way. So now I want to decrease the RPM because I want to slow down a bit. I'm going to decrease RPM to the bottom of the green arc, about 2,000 RPM, and manifold pressure at about 15 inches. That will keep us from overspeeding. Now I got one thing I need to talk about, and that is shock cooling. Shock cooling is a phenomenon that can happen. It's actually, some people consider it a myth. There has been statistics and research that they haven't been able to prove shock cooling is a thing by either way. But do you really want to risk it when you're in the air? Shock cooling can happen if you descend and you have a low power setting on descend, so the engine's not producing as much heat, therefore, and you have a higher airspeed on descend, so the air is going into the engine faster and cooling it off more. You want to keep the engine warm. You see you have an extra gauge here, the cylinder head temperature. That is how hot your cylinders are. Now you control that with the cowl flaps. Well, you control that just like temperature in the 172 with proper fuel management, proper procedure management, but you have the cowl flaps here to help control the engine. During cruise, you want these open on climb, or mostly so. During cruise, you want them more along the lines of somewhere between halfway and full closed. I like 1 notch above closed during cruise, but on descent, you're wanting these things full closed. And what that does is if you look right here where the exhaust pipes are, if I manipulate the control, you can see me opening them. That increases the airflow out of the engine. And by closing them, I'm decreasing the airflow out of the engine, so not as much of the hot air is leaving the engine compartment. Now, shock cooling will actually damage the engine because well, you're cooling the engine too fast, and these extreme temperature changes are bad for the engine. Metal doesn't like extreme temperature changes, okay? And especially steel, and that's what the engine is made out of. So you definitely want to avoid shock cooling, even if you don't think it's real. So to avoid shock cooling, you just have to use the cowl flaps on your descent, make sure they are closed, and you may also want to bring the fuel mixture back up. If you're running, say, lean of peak, you might want to bring it back up to peak before you actually start descending. You can also decrease your throttle and slow down prior to your descent. That way you don't cool the engine off too quick. Okay, so now we've leveled off. We need to increase our power. So first I'm going to increase prop back up to 2400. Then I'm going to increase throttle back up to 20 inches. And that is proper engine and propeller management right there. Okay, so Eastman should be coming into sight. It's right over there. Let's get our weather real quick. I did tune that frequency right, didn't I? Let me use the auto tune real quick. Let's see, Eastman, part of Georgia Regional. Is there no ATIS? I guess not. Okay, back to COM 1 then. Eastman Tower. I guess there is no ATIS. Alright, we'll request a full stop landing. We are 10 miles out.
Eastman Tower, Cessna November 584 Lima, Quebec, 10 miles southeast, select Cessna November 584 Lima, Quebec, Eastman Tower, flight right base, runway 2, altimeter 3024.
Alright, runway 2 is active. We've been told to fly the right base.
Enter right base, runway 2, Cessna North Lima, Quebec.
I have no idea of the altimeter setting because there's no ATIS here for some reason. I mean, it's listed on my GPS that it has an ATIS on 119.43, which is a frequency you can't tune in the comm radio for some reason. Who put that there? 119.4. Let's try that. Huh. Someone remind me to check my scenery for this airfield. Doesn't seem like it's got the frequencies right. Alright, I have Eastman Airfield in sight. So we want to make the right base for runway 2. So runway 2, right base, we're pretty much in position to do that. So I'm going to turn the autopilot off. And again, I'm going to start a descent. First, I'm going to pitch the plane down. And we're decreasing power, so I'm going to decrease the RPM down to 15 inches first, or the manifold pressure, 15 inches. Then I'm going to decrease the RPM down to the bottom of the green arc for slowing it down. And then I'm going to reset the throttle. Back to 15 inches. Winds are calm, clear to land runway 2.
Runway 2, Cessna North Lima, Quebec.
Alright, now this is where a lot of people screw up, is coming in the landing. Note we're coming in fast. So we need to go get ready for our landing. We're below 140 knots, so I can go ahead and set the flaps to the first notch. That will help us slow down some. Alright. We need to do the gump check. We're 2,000 feet now, so we definitely want to start our landing setup. Our lights are on. Move that back to full rich. Now, let's go over the gump check. The gump check is a check that complex airplanes, it's more along the lines for multi-engine planes and complex planes with retractable gear, but any airplane can do it, even the 182 or even the 172. Now, gump...
Cessna November 431 November at runway 2, ready for takeoff. IFR at Whiskey 78.
GUMP is a acronym, stands for gas, undercarriage, mixture, prop. So gas, make sure we're on both tanks. Undercarriage doesn't apply, our gear is fixed. Mixture, full rich. Prop, we want full RPM. So there's full RPM. You want to have your RPM at the highest setting when you're coming in. That way you only have to worry about manipulating one control. So now that my prop is back full forward, I only need to worry about throttle now. So now it's just like flying the 172. I'll use the RPM to set my engine. Now on landing, I like to open the cow flaps back up 1 or 2 notches for landing. Now there's a second part of the gump check. Some people like to say gumps with an S at the end. The S stands for seatbelt or safety harness. Make sure that is fastened. Okay, so 65 knots is the approach speed in this plane. We are coming on the base leg now. I can go ahead and set flaps to 20. A little high. I'm actually going to head straight for the numbers, because there's a plane waiting to take off. We don't want to delay him too long. Real life, Tower would have told him to take off because we were still far out, but you know, real life is not Flight Simulator, sadly. So I'm going to head straight for the numbers. And at this point, I'm going to start using both throttle and pitch
November
to...
134 Romeo Juliet, wind calm, clear to land, runway 2, following Cessna skyline on final. Cleared to land, runway 2, Cessna 4, Romeo Juliet.
There's another Cessna somewhere landing runway 2. I don't see him. Oh well, we're landing first anyway, so don't know where he's at. Alright, don't have the field quite made yet. So again, we want only want to manipulate the throttle when you're coming into the airport to land. That's why you put your prop back up to the full extent. Alright, we got the field made. Set flaps to full, and we want to pitch for 65 knots. Anyone else notice that Cessna there is in the grass? Alright, the winds were calm. Well, there might be a slight breeze from the right though. Alright, so coming in on the round out, just like in the 172. You just gotta remember this plane is a little bit heavier, and its engine's a bit more powerful, so you gotta be ready for that. If you have to go around, the airplane creates quite a bit of torque and P factor at low airspeeds and high power settings, so definitely be ready for that if you have to go around. And the plane, it behaves a lot like the 172, but it's also very different.
Cessna 4, Lima to Quebec, contact ground on 121.175. Contact even ground on 121.175, Cessna 4, Lima, Quebec. Thanks for the help, bye.
Alright, so clearing the runway, flaps up, lights off, mixture, leaning out for ground ops, transponder set to on, open the cow flaps all the way, and I'm not going to worry, I'll contact ground, or I'll switch to ground, but I'll just monitor because the FBO is right here in front of us. So I'll just taxi straight ahead into the FBO. I won't worry with GSX at the moment. Alright, so we can open our windows now. Alright, so this was a quick video just to show you the operational characteristics of the 182. Remember, they are very, very similar to 172, so if you really want to learn how to operate this airplane, all you gotta do is watch my Cessna 172 tutorial series, which all videos are up right now. They're all up. There's no more gonna be get for them. I think I got one more, but it's not really an important one. So just watch that, and what I recommend doing is giving the manual that comes with this airplane a read. That will walk you through most of the operational differences between the two and the specifics of operations in this airplane. So other than that, you just got to remember that you have a constant speed prop, so you got to know how to work with that. Again, increase right, decrease left. Increase left, decrease right, I think. Yes, increase left, decrease right. So again, increasing throttle, you want to do throttle or prop first, then throttle, increasing or decreasing power, Do throttle, then prop, increasing prop, then throttle. That's what you want to work with. Keep your mind on shock cooling on descent and know how to work with this HSI. Does anyone else hear a jet? Oh, there's a caravan over there. Alright, so shutdown flows just like in the 172. Alright, so avionics, lights, and mixture. Wait for the prop to stop. Magnetos, lights, master battery. Close the cow flaps, shut off the fuel. And the aircraft is now completely shut down. We can let Heidi out. Heck, let myself out too. Set our wheel chocks. This caravan's gonna park next to us. Hi caravan, hi. And we'll put the pitot cover back on, control lock, empty the plane, and shut the doors. Now I left the windows open, but oh well. We'll say we're just stopping for like a cup of coffee or something, so it'll be fine. Alright, so that is flying the Cessna 182. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.